Margaret Ellis believed she was capturing a simple graduation photograph on that spring morning in 1910. The beloved Savannah schoolteacher arranged her students in their Sunday best, watching them beam with pride as the photographer prepared his equipment. But when the developed picture arrived weeks later, Margaret discovered something that would haunt her for the remainder of her days. Standing in the back row was a tall, severe-looking woman who had never entered her classroom, a woman whose face seemed crudely stitched together like a patchwork quilt. Most disturbing of all, when Margaret attempted to show the photograph to others, the mysterious figure had vanished completely, as if she refused to be captured a second time. Before we continue, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The morning of May 15th, 1910, dawned crisp and clear in Savannah, Georgia, with the kind of golden sunlight photographers prayed for. Margaret Ellis stood in the doorway of Whitmore Elementary School, smoothing her dark wool skirt and adjusting the cameo brooch at her throat as she watched her graduating class of 22 students file into the Bryn courtyard. At 34, Margaret had dedicated 12 years of her life to teaching the children of Savannah's working families, and this particular group held a special place in her heart. They had endured the harsh winter together, struggled through arithmetic lessons and penmanship exercises, and now they were prepared to move on to their next chapter. The photographer, a thin man named Harold Blackwood, who had traveled from Atlanta with his heavy equipment, was already setting up his tripod and adjusting his camera when Margaret stepped outside. The children chattered excitedly amongst themselves, their voices carrying the musical cadence of the Deep South. Little Rebecca Chen, daughter of the town's only Chinese laundry owner, tugged nervously at her white lace collar, while James Kowalski, whose Polish immigrant parents worked at the cotton mill, tried to slick down his unruly hair with spit and determination. "Children, children," Margaret called out, her voice carrying the authority born from years of managing boisterous classrooms. "Please arrange yourselves as we practiced yesterday. Shorter ones in front, taller ones in the back." She moved among them like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, gently guiding Sarah Mikan into the front row and nudging Robert Fitzgerald toward the back, where his gangly frame wouldn't obstruct the smaller children. As the students settled into their positions, Margaret couldn't help but feel a surge of maternal pride. These weren't just her pupils, they were her legacy. In a world where education was often considered a luxury for the wealthy, she had fought tooth and nail to ensure that every child in her classroom, regardless of their family's station, received the same quality instruction. The mill owner's children sat beside the sons and daughters of servants, all united by their shared hunger for knowledge and Margaret's unwavering belief in their potential. Harold Blackwood peered through his camera lens and frowned. "Miss Ellis, I'm afraid we need someone taller in the back row to balance the composition. Do you have another student who could join us?" He gestured toward the back, where a gap in the arrangement created an awkward visual hole in what should have been a perfect triangular formation. Margaret glanced around the courtyard, but all her students were already in position. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood, but this is everyone. Perhaps I could stand in the back myself." She had been planning to remain off to the side, preferring to let the children have their moment in the spotlight. But if it would improve the photograph, she was willing to join them. "That would be perfect," Harold replied, adjusting his lens. "Just step right there behind young Robert." He pointed to the spot where Margaret should position herself, seemingly unaware that his suggestion would place her directly next to someone who wasn't present. Margaret moved to the back row, her hand resting gently on Robert's shoulder as she found her place. The morning sun felt warm on her face, and she could smell the sweet fragrance of magnolia blossoms from the tree overhanging the school's front gate. Everything felt perfect, exactly as a graduation photo should feel. captured in that eternal moment between childhood and the responsibilities awaiting beyond the classroom walls. "Everyone hold very still," Harold called out as he disappeared beneath the black cloth draped over his camera. "This will take several seconds, so no moving, no blinking, and certainly no giggling." His muffled voice carried a gentle humor that put the children at ease, though Margaret noticed young Timothy Walsh's cheeks were already twitching with suppressed laughter. The shutter clicked, capturing what should have been a simple moment in time. 22 children in their finest clothes, their teacher standing proudly behind them. The solid brick facade of Whitmore Elementary provided a dignified backdrop. It was the kind of photograph that would hang in parlors and be tucked into family Bibles, a treasured reminder of education's promise and childhood's fleeting nature. But as Harold packed up his equipment and promised to have the developed photographs ready within 2 weeks, none of them could have imagined what the camera had truly captured. Margaret dismissed the children with hugs and well-wishes, watching as they scattered to their homes and summer adventures. She lingered in the courtyard long after the last student had disappeared around the corner, already missing their daily presence and wondering what the next school year would bring. The days that followed were filled with the administrative tasks, marking the end of every school year. Margaret organized her classroom supplies, updated student records, and prepared reports for the school board. She found herself frequently glancing toward the spot where Harold had set up his camera, replaying the morning in her mind and anticipating the arrival of their graduation photograph. It had been such a perfect day, with every detail falling into place, as if orchestrated by some benevolent force. When Harold Blackwood returned to Whitmore Elementary on the morning of May 30th, he carried a manila envelope containing 23 copies of the graduation photograph. Margaret had ordered extras so each child could have their own copy to take home to their families, a gesture that required her to dip into her own modest savings, but one she considered worthwhile. These children deserved to have this milestone documented and preserved. Harold seemed unusually quiet as he came in and handed over the envelope, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by something Margaret couldn't quite identify. "Miss Ellis," he said, adjusting his spectacles nervously, "I want you to know that I double-checked my equipment and my developing process. Everything was done exactly as it should have been." He paused, as if weighing whether to say more, then shook his head and tipped his hat. "Good day to you, ma'am. I hope the photographs meet with your approval." Margaret watched him drive away in his modest carriage, puzzled by his strange behavior, but eager to see the results of their graduation session. She waited until she was alone in her classroom before carefully opening the envelope and sliding out the photographs. The image that greeted her was both exactly what she expected and completely wrong in ways that made her heart skip irregularly. There were her 22 students exactly as they had posed that morning. Rebecca Chen in the front row with her perfectly pressed white dress. James Kowalski attempting to look serious despite the cowlick that refused to stay down. Sarah Miken's gap-toothed smile bright with joy. Every child was captured perfectly, their faces glowing with the pride of accomplishment and the anticipation of summer freedom. And there was Margaret herself, standing in the back row with her hand on Robert's shoulder, her own smile gentle and maternal. But standing directly beside her, where there had been empty space during the actual photography session, was a tall woman in a dark dress that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The woman's face was the most disturbing element of all, appearing to be constructed from mismatched pieces, like a macabre puzzle assembled by unsteady hands. Margaret's breath caught in her throat as she studied the stranger's features more closely. The woman's left eye was smaller than her right, positioned slightly too high on what might have been a borrowed cheekbone. Her nose appeared to have been taken from a different face entirely, its shape and size completely wrong for the surrounding structure. Most unsettling of all was her mouth, which seemed to have been stitched into place with visible seam lines extending from the corners like some grotesque approximation of a smile. The woman's hair hung in lank strands around her face, and her clothing, while period-appropriate, had an oddly timeless quality that made it impossible to place her social standing or occupation. She stood perfectly still among the group, her presence so naturalistic that anyone glancing casually at the photograph might assume she belonged there. But Margaret knew with absolute certainty that no such person had been present during the photography session. Margaret set the photograph aside with trembling hands and examined the remaining copies, hoping what she had seen was some kind of development error limited to a single print. But every copy showed the same unnerving image, the mysterious woman standing in the back row as if she had every right to be there. Margaret spread several photographs across her desk, comparing them carefully. But the woman's position and appearance remained consistent in each one. The logical part of Margaret's mind searched for rational explanations. Perhaps someone had been standing behind the camera, and Harold's equipment had somehow created a double exposure. Maybe there had been another teacher present that Margaret had simply forgotten about in the excitement of the moment. But even as she grasped for these sensible possibilities, she knew they didn't hold up to scrutiny. Margaret's memory of that morning was crystal clear, and she would have noticed another adult joining their group, especially one with such distinctive and unsettling features. That afternoon, Margaret walked to Harold Blackwood's temporary studio in a rented room above Peterson's general store. She found him packing his equipment for the journey back to Atlanta, his movements quick and efficient, as if he were eager to leave Savannah behind. When she knocked on his door, he opened it only part way, his eyes darting nervously around the hallway before stepping aside to let her enter. "Miss Ellis, I was hoping you might come by," Harold said, gesturing for her to sit in the room's single chair while he perched on the edge of a wooden crate. "I've been thinking about your photograph all morning, and I want you to know I've been taking pictures for 15 years. I've developed thousands of plates, and I've never seen anything like what appeared in your image." Margaret reached into her bag and withdrew one of the graduation photographs, placing it on the small table between them. "Mr. Blackwood, can you explain how this woman came to be in our photograph? I can assure you she was not present during the session, and I cannot find any record of her in our school files or anywhere else in quaint Savannah." Harold leaned forward to study the photograph, his face growing pale as he examined the mysterious figure. "Miss Ellis, I've examined my equipment thoroughly, and there's no mechanical explanation for what you see here. The woman appears to have been photographed at the same time as everyone else, under the same lighting conditions, with the same focus and depth. She's not a double exposure or a development accident. According to every technical aspect of this image, she was standing right there beside you when I took this picture." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine, despite the warm afternoon air filtering through the room's single window. "But that's impossible, Mr. Blackwood. I remember every moment of that session. There was no one else present except my students and myself." Harold rubbed his temples as if fighting off a headache. "Miss Ellis, there's something else I need to tell you. Something that's been bothering me since I developed these plates. When I first pulled this image from the chemical bath, the woman's face looked different. More normal. It was during the fixing process that her features began to change, as if the chemicals were revealing something that had been hidden beneath the surface." Margaret's hands clenched in her lap. "What do you mean exactly?" "I watched it happen," Harold said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It was like watching someone put on a mask, except in reverse. Her face became more patchwork, more stitched together, as if the photographic process was revealing her true nature instead of concealing it. I've never seen anything like it, and I pray I never will again." Margaret left Harold's studio with more questions than answers, the graduation photograph tucked safely in her bag, but weighing on her mind like a physical burden. She spent the rest of the afternoon walking through Savannah's familiar streets, trying to make sense of what she had witnessed. The rational part of her mind insisted there had to be a logical explanation, but a growing sense of unease suggested that logic might not be sufficient to explain this particular mystery. That evening, Margaret sat in her small parlor with the photograph spread on her coffee table. A magnifying glass borrowed from her neighbor allowed her to examine every detail of the mysterious woman's appearance. Under magnification, the stitched quality of the woman's features became even more pronounced, as if she had been assembled from different people entirely. Margaret could see faint lines where the pieces of her face connected, like scars that had healed poorly or seams that had been inexpertly joined. The woman's clothing, too, revealed strange details under close examination. While it appeared to be a typical 1910 dress from a distance, the magnifying glass revealed inconsistencies in the fabric's weave and pattern, as if different pieces from different garments had been combined to create her entire outfit. Even her hair seemed to shift between textures and colors, appearing dark in some areas and lighter in others, as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Margaret was so absorbed in her examination that she failed to notice the sunset outside her windows until her parlor was engulfed in shadows. She lit the oil lamp beside her chair and returned to the photograph. But something had altered. The mysterious woman who had been standing clearly visible in the back row just moments before was now absent. Margaret blinked hard and held the photograph closer to the light. But the back row now showed only Margaret herself standing behind her students, exactly as it should have been. Her heart pounding, Margaret grabbed the other copies from the envelope, spreading them across her table in the lamplight. Every single copy now showed the same scene, the graduation group precisely as it had been arranged that morning, with no mysterious woman anywhere to be seen. Margaret checked and rechecked each photograph, but the patchwork-faced stranger had vanished completely, leaving no trace of her ever having been present. Margaret spent a sleepless night, wondering if she had imagined the entire experience. But Harold Blackwood's words echoed in her memory, confirming that she had not been the only witness to the woman's presence. The next morning, she returned to his studio only to find he had departed for Atlanta earlier than planned, leaving no forwarding address with the proprietor of the general store. The mystery might have ended there, filed away as one of those inexplicable occurrences that occasionally intrude upon ordinary life, if not for what happened when Margaret began distributing the photographs to her former students. She visited each family personally, presenting the children with their graduation portraits and receiving the grateful thanks of parents who treasured these formal documents of their children's educational achievements. It was at the Chen family's laundry that Margaret first noticed something was amiss. Mrs. Chen, a quiet woman who spoke limited English, but whose intelligence was evident in her carefully managed business, accepted the photograph with a deep bow of gratitude. But as she examined the image, her expression changed to one of confusion and fear. "Miss Ellis," Mrs. Chen said in her careful English, "who is this woman in the back? She was not there when picture was taken." She pointed to the back row, and Margaret's blood ran cold. The mysterious woman was there again, standing exactly where she had appeared in Margaret's first viewing of the photograph, her patchwork face clearly visible among the group. Margaret took the photograph from Mrs. Chen's hands, studying it carefully. The woman was indeed there, as solid and present as any of the students, her stitched features exactly as Margaret remembered them. "Mrs. Chen, you're absolutely right. She was not present when the photograph was taken. I don't know who she is, or how she came to appear in this image." Mrs. Chen stepped back from the photograph, as if it might contaminate her by proximity. "In China, we have stories of hungry ghosts, spirits who cannot rest. They attach themselves to happy moments, trying to steal joy for themselves. This woman, she has the look of someone who is not finished with living. Margaret left the Chen family's laundry with a growing sense of dread, but she continued her rounds, determined to deliver photographs to all of her students' families. At each stop, the mysterious woman appeared and disappeared, seemingly at random. Sometimes she was visible in the photograph when Margaret arrived. Sometimes she appeared only after the family had examined the image for several minutes, and sometimes she remained invisible throughout the entire visit. The Kowalski family, Polish immigrants who had brought their own stories of supernatural encounters from the old country, took one look at the photograph and immediately began discussing protection rituals in their native language. James's father, a practical man who worked long hours at the cotton mill, crossed himself when he saw the woman and insisted that Margaret take the photograph back. "Miss Ellis," he said, in accented but clear English, "in Poland, we know of such things. This woman, she is not natural. She feeds on innocence, on the joy of children. You must not let her remain attached to these pictures." He handed the photograph back to Margaret with shaking hands. "Please take it away from my family." Margaret found herself in the strange position of carrying photographs that seemed to have a will of their own, revealing their hidden occupant to some viewers, while remaining perfectly normal for others. The children themselves seemed to have mixed reactions to the mysterious woman's presence. Some saw her clearly and asked innocent questions about who she was, while others looked directly at her location in the photograph and saw nothing unusual. It was young Timothy Walsh, the boy who had struggled with giggles during the photography session, who provided the most chilling observation. When his mother showed him the graduation photograph, Timothy studied it carefully before looking up with wide, serious eyes. "Mama," he said, in the direct way children have of stating uncomfortable truths, "that lady in the back wasn't there when we took the picture, but she's been watching us for a long time. I used to see her standing outside our classroom window during arithmetic lessons, but when I told Miss Ellis, she couldn't see her at all." Timothy's mother, Sarah Walsh, worked as a seamstress and had developed sharp eyes for detail through years of careful needlework. She examined the photograph closely, paying particular attention to the mysterious woman's appearance. "Miss Ellis, this woman's face, it's not natural. Look at how her features don't quite fit together, as if someone has sewn different pieces together to make a whole person." Margaret had noticed the same thing during her magnified examination, but hearing it confirmed by someone else made the observation feel more real and more disturbing. "Mrs. Walsh, have you ever seen or heard of anyone matching this woman's description in Savannah?" Sarah Walsh shook her head slowly. "No, Miss Ellis, and I would remember someone who looked like this. But there's something about her that reminds me of the old stories my grandmother used to tell about women who died in childbirth or lost children to illness. Sometimes their grief was so strong that it wouldn't let them rest properly. They would attach themselves to other people's children, trying to fill the emptiness inside them." Over the following weeks, Margaret found herself drawn into research that took her far from the comfortable world of lesson plans and grade books. She spent hours in Savannah's public library, searching through local newspapers and historical records for any mention of a woman who might match the mysterious figure in her photograph. She consulted with the city's oldest residents, hoping someone might remember a tragedy or disappearance that could explain the woman's appearance. The librarian, Mrs. Adelaide Hoffman, was particularly helpful in Margaret's research. Adelaide had worked at the library for 20 years and had developed an encyclopedic knowledge of Savannah's history and its more unusual stories. When Margaret described the woman in the photograph, Adelaide's expression grew thoughtful. "Miss Ellis, there are several stories that might be relevant to what you've experienced, but none of them have happy endings. Adelaide led Margaret to a section housing the city's historical archives, pulling several bound volumes from the shelves. These are accounts of unusual events documented by various residents and officials over the past 50 years. Some might sound like folklore, but they were reported as factual occurrences by seemingly reliable witnesses. Margaret spent hours reading through the archives, discovering a pattern of strange encounters stretching back decades. There were reports of a tall woman in dark clothing who appeared at family gatherings and community celebrations, always standing at the edges of group photographs or lurking in the background of important events. The descriptions varied in details, but they all shared common elements: a patchwork quality to the woman's appearance, her tendency to appear in photographs where she hadn't been physically present, and her particular interest in children and educational settings. One account, written by a school principal in 1895, described a situation remarkably similar to Margaret's experience. Principal Jonathan Hartwell had organized a photograph of his entire student body to commemorate the school's 10th anniversary. When developed, it showed a strange woman standing among the children, her face appearing assembled from mismatched pieces, her presence unexplained by anyone present during the session. According to Hartwell's account, the woman appeared and disappeared from the photograph, seemingly at random, visible to some viewers but not to others. Several families reported their children began experiencing nightmares after receiving their copies, dreams where the strange woman visited their bedrooms and spoke in a voice sounding like multiple people talking at once. Margaret found another account from 1902, written by a photographer named Marcus Webb, hired to take portraits at a wealthy family's estate. Webb recorded that when he developed the photographs, several contained the image of a woman not present during the session. According to Webb's notes, the woman's face appeared constructed rather than born, with features seeming to belong to different people entirely. What made Webb's account particularly unsettling was his description of what happened when he attempted to show the photographs to others. Like Margaret's experience, the woman appeared and disappeared from the images at will, visible to some while completely absent to others. Webb eventually destroyed all photographs from that session, reporting he felt the woman's presence was somehow harmful to those who viewed her image. The most disturbing account Margaret found was written in 1906 by Dr. Helena Morrison, a physician documenting unusual medical cases in the Savannah area. Dr. Morrison wrote about treating several children exposed to photographs containing the mysterious woman's image. The children all reported similar symptoms: nightmares, a sense of being watched, and the feeling someone was trying to communicate with them through their dreams. According to Dr. Morrison's notes, the children described dreams where the patchwork woman visited them and spoke of her need to find her own children, taken from her long ago. The woman in their dreams claimed she had been searching for decades, attaching herself to photographs of other people's children, hoping to find the ones she had lost. Dr. Morrison theorized the woman's grief had somehow transcended death, creating a spiritual presence drawn to innocence and youth. Margaret closed the last archive volume with shaking hands, her mind reeling from her discovery. The pattern was clear. The mysterious woman had been appearing in photographs throughout Savannah for at least 15 years, always in connection with children and educational settings. But what troubled Margaret most was the suggestion in Dr. Morrison's account that the woman's presence might be harmful to children exposed to her image. That evening, Margaret sat in her parlor with all 23 copies of the graduation photograph spread across every available surface. She had been checking them periodically throughout her research, and the pattern of the woman's appearances and disappearances seemed to be accelerating. Sometimes she was visible in all copies simultaneously, sometimes in only a few, and sometimes she vanished completely for hours. Margaret had begun to feel engaged in a supernatural game of hide-and-seek, with the mysterious woman revealing herself only when it suited her purposes. The woman's expression never changed in the photographs, maintaining the same stitched-together approximation of a smile. But Margaret had begun to sense a growing urgency in her presence, as if time were running out for some unknown purpose. As Margaret studied the photographs in the lamplight, she noticed something new. The woman's position in the back row had shifted slightly, moving closer to Margaret herself with each appearance. In the earliest viewings, the woman had stood at the far end of the back row, but now she appeared to be leaning toward Margaret, as if trying to whisper something in her ear. The change was subtle but unmistakable, suggesting the woman's presence in the photograph was not static, but actively evolving. Margaret had just made this observation when she heard a soft knocking at her front door. She glanced at the clock on her mantel, surprised to see it was nearly 10:00 in the evening, far too late for a social call. The knocking came again, gentle but persistent, and Margaret reluctantly set aside the photographs to answer the door. Standing on her front porch was Rebecca Chen, still wearing the white dress from the graduation photograph, but now looking pale and frightened. The little girl's parents would never have allowed her out alone at this hour, and Margaret immediately invited her inside, while trying to understand how she had come to be there. "Rebecca, sweetheart, what are you doing out so late? Do your parents know where you are?" Margaret led the child into her parlor, noting Rebecca's eyes were drawn immediately to the photographs scattered around the room. Rebecca moved toward the photographs as if pulled by an invisible string, her small hands reaching out to touch one of the copies. "Miss Ellis, the lady in the picture has been visiting my dreams. She says she knows where my real parents are, the ones who gave me away when I was a baby. She wants to take me to see them, but she needs me to help her first." Margaret felt her blood turn to ice as she gently took Rebecca's hands and led her away from the photographs. "Rebecca, what exactly did this lady tell you in your dreams?" The child's voice was dreamy and distant, as if she were still partially asleep. "She told me she lost her own children a long time ago, and she's been searching for them ever since. She said if I help her find them, she'll take me to my real family, the one that looks like me, and will love me the way I deserve to be loved." Margaret knelt to Rebecca's eye level, taking the child's hands in her own. "Rebecca, I need you to listen to me very carefully. The lady in the photograph is not someone who can help you. She's not real in the way you and I are real, and the things she's telling you in your dreams are not true. Your parents, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, they love you very much, and they are your real family." Rebecca's expression grew confused, as if trying to reconcile two different versions of reality. "But Miss Ellis, she showed me pictures in my dreams of a beautiful Chinese woman who looked just like me. She said my real mother has been crying every day since I was taken away from her, and that she's been waiting for me to come home." Margaret realized the mysterious woman was exploiting Rebecca's natural questions about her adoption, using the child's longing for connection to manipulate her emotions. The Chen family had always been open with Rebecca about her adoption, but like many adopted children, she sometimes wondered about her biological parents and whether they might provide something her adoptive family could not. "Rebecca, the lady in the photograph feeds on sad feelings and confusion. She takes children's natural questions and uses them to make children feel unhappy with the families who love them." Margaret chose her words carefully, trying to explain a complex, supernatural situation in terms a young child could understand. "She doesn't really know anything about your birth parents, and she can't take you to them because that's not how adoption works." Margaret walked Rebecca home through Savannah's quiet streets, staying with the family long enough to explain the situation to Mr. and Mrs. Chen. The parents were grateful for Margaret's intervention, but deeply concerned about their daughter's exposure to what they now recognized as a malevolent spiritual presence. Mrs. Chen immediately began preparing traditional protective charms, while Mr. Chen spoke of consulting with the Chinese community's eldest members for advice on dealing with vengeful spirits. The next morning brought more troubling news. Margaret arrived at school to find several parents waiting for her, all carrying copies of the graduation photograph and all reporting similar experiences with their children. The mysterious woman had been appearing in dreams throughout the night, targeting the children with promises and manipulations tailored to each child's particular vulnerabilities. James Kowalski's parents reported their son dreamed of the woman promising to reunite him with grandparents who died in Poland before his birth. Sarah Miken's mother described nightmares where the woman claimed Sarah's deceased father was waiting for her in a special place where families never had to be separated. In each case, the woman was exploiting the children's natural griefs and longings, using their emotional vulnerabilities to establish psychological connections. Margaret realized the situation had moved beyond her ability to handle alone. She needed help, but the rational authorities she might normally turn to, school administrators, local officials, even clergy, would likely dismiss her claims as hysteria or imagination. She needed someone who understood the supernatural aspects of what was happening and could provide practical guidance for protecting the children. Mrs. Adelaide Hoffman at the library had mentioned during Margaret's research that Savannah was home to several individuals specializing in unusual spiritual matters. One name in particular had come up repeatedly in the historical accounts Margaret studied. Mama Lavinia, an elderly woman living in the city's historic district, known for her ability to deal with restless spirits and supernatural disturbances. Margaret had never sought such services before, her Presbyterian upbringing having instilled a healthy skepticism toward folk magic and spiritual practices. But her students' safety outweighed her personal reservations, and she found herself walking toward Mama Lavinia's house on the afternoon of June 2nd, carrying one graduation photograph in a manila envelope. Mama Lavinia's house was a modest wooden structure, painted soft blue, with wind chimes hanging from the porch eaves and protective symbols carved into window frames. The elderly woman answering Margaret's knock was small and dignified, with silver hair braided down her back and eyes seeming to see more than they should. She invited Margaret inside without being told why she had come, as if the visit were expected. "You've got yourself a picture problem, don't you, child?" Mama Lavinia said, leading Margaret into a sitting room filled with candles, dried herbs, and religious artifacts from various traditions. "I've been feeling her stirring around the city for weeks now, getting stronger and more desperate. She's been quiet a few years, but something's awakened her again." Margaret removed the graduation photograph, placing it on the small table between them. Mama Lavinia studied the image carefully, her expression growing grave, examining the mysterious woman in the back row. "Lord have mercy," Mama Lavinia whispered, touching fingers to a small cross around her neck. "She's clearer than I've ever seen her before. Usually she's just a shadow, a suggestion of presence, but in this picture she's almost solid. That's not good news, child. Not good news at all." Margaret leaned forward anxiously. "Mama Lavinia, who is she? What does she want with my students?" The elderly woman continued studying the photograph, occasionally making small clicking sounds, noticing particular details. "Her name was Constance Whitmore, lived here in Savannah about 25 years ago. She was a teacher like you. Worked at the very school where you took this picture. She loved those children like they were her own, maybe loved them too much for her own good." Mama Lavinia moved to a wooden cabinet, withdrawing a leather-bound journal, flipping through pages covered in careful handwriting until finding the entry sought. Constance never married, never had children of her own. She poured all her maternal feelings into her students, and when the yellow fever outbreak came in 1885, she lost most in a single month, 23 children dead, including some who'd been like daughters and sons to her. Margaret felt her heart sink, understanding the tragedy's scope. What happened to Constance after the outbreak? The grief broke her mind, Mama Lavinia continued, reading from her journal. She became convinced the children weren't really dead. They'd been taken somewhere she couldn't find them. She started collecting photographs of other people's children, trying to piece together a new family from images and memories. People said she'd sit in her empty classroom for hours, talking to her students' ghosts and planning lessons for children who'd never return. Mama Lavinia closed the journal, looking directly at Margaret. Constance died in 1887 alone, in that same classroom where she'd taught. They found her surrounded by children's photographs, hundreds collected from families all over the city. But her death didn't end her searching. Her spirit's been appearing in photographs ever since, still looking for her lost students, still trying to build the family taken from her. Margaret absorbed this, understanding why the mysterious woman appeared in her graduation photograph and targeted children with manipulative dreams. Mama Lavinia, how can I protect my students? Several have been contacted through dreams. I'm afraid the situation worsens. The elderly woman stood, gathering various items: candles, small cloth bags filled with herbs, handmade jewelry pieces. First, understand, Constance isn't evil traditionally. She's a grieving mother figure whose love twisted by loss and time. But that doesn't make her less dangerous to living children. Mama Lavinia handed Margaret a small cloth bag tied with red thread. This for protection. Keep it handling those photographs. Constance feeds on emotional connections, especially teacher-student bonds. She sees you a rival, another woman having children she believes should be hers. Margaret accepted the protective charm, feeling slightly foolish, but grateful for potential help. What tell parents? How explain without sounding mad? No need explaining supernatural aspects, Mama Lavinia said, preparing additional protective items for distribution. Just tell them children exposed disturbing images, causing nightmares. These items help sleep peacefully. Most parents concerned practical solutions than explanations. Mama Lavinia walked Margaret through a ritual-severing connection between the woman and graduation photographs. The process involved burning specific herbs while reciting prayers from multiple traditions, creating a spiritual barrier, preventing Constance using images as doorways into dreams. Margaret followed carefully, hoping lack of experience wouldn't diminish effectiveness. As smoke filled the room, Margaret watched fascination and horror as the photograph changed. Constance Whitmore's image grew fainter, transparent, as if slowly erasing presence. But rather than disappearing, the ghostly teacher fought spiritual barriers erected. "She's stronger expected," Mama Lavinia murmured, adding herbs. 25 years grief-searching gave considerable power. May require more than one attempt. Her voice carried concern, making Margaret's stomach clench. Margaret spent hours learning spiritual protection techniques, understanding the scope dealt with. According to extensive research, Constance Whitmore's spirit grew stronger over years, fed by encounters with living children, increasing desperation, rebuilding lost family. The yellow fever outbreak taking students particularly cruel, Mama Lavinia explained, preparing protective charms. Those children didn't just die. They suffered weeks Constance watched helplessly. She held hands passing, promised always keep safe. When died anyway, mind couldn't accept failing. Margaret learned appearances escalated, becoming frequent, aggressive, contacting children. The spirit developed sophisticated manipulation, tailoring approach each child's emotional needs, vulnerabilities. Rebecca Chen's adoption issues, James Kowalski's separation from family, Sarah Miken's grief over father's death, all opportunities establishing connections. She studies them, Mama Lavinia said, tying herbs into sachets. Watches Edge's vision, learns fear's desires, uses knowledge, present providing missing. It was a sophisticated form of spiritual predation. As the afternoon progressed, Margaret gained a deeper understanding of the supernatural forces she confronted. Constance Whitmore wasn't merely a confused ghost wandering aimlessly through the world of the living. She was an intelligent, determined spirit with a specific mission and the accumulated power of decades spent pursuing that goal. Margaret's graduation photograph had provided access to 22 new potential victims, children whose innocence and vulnerability made them perfect targets for her manipulations. When Margaret finally left Mama Lavinia's house, she carried a bag filled with protective charms, detailed instructions for spiritual cleansing rituals, and a much clearer understanding of the danger her students faced. The elderly woman had also given her a hand-drawn map showing Constance Whitmore's grave location in Bonaventure Cemetery, explaining that visiting the burial site might prove necessary if protective measures proved insufficient. Sometimes talking directly to the spirit can help, Mama Lavinia explained. Constance was a reasonable woman in life, a dedicated teacher who truly loved her students. If you can reach the part remembering compassion and professional responsibility, you might convince her to leave your children alone. Margaret returned to her small house at sunset, the bag of protective charms feeling both reassuring and surreal. She had entered this day a rational educator dealing with an unusual photographic anomaly, and was ending it as someone actively engaged in supernatural combat for her students' souls. The transformation felt jarring, but the evidence was undeniable, and the children's safety took precedence over her personal comfort with the situation. That evening, Margaret began distributing protective charms to her students' families. She visited each household personally, explaining the children experienced nightmares related to disturbing images, and that these traditional remedies might help them sleep more peacefully. Most parents accepted the charms gratefully, asking no difficult questions about origin or purpose. The Chen family received their protective items with particular reverence, Mrs. Chen immediately recognizing the spiritual significance of the herbs and symbols involved. Miss Ellis, these are powerful protections. The woman who made them understands the old ways of keeping evil spirits from children. You have chosen your help well. Margaret's next stop was the Kowalski household, where James's father examined the protective charm with the serious attention of someone raised with similar traditions. In Poland, we know spirits preying on children's sadness, he said, accepting the small cloth bag. My grandmother taught prayers keeping such things away. I will teach them to James tonight. Each family visit reinforced Margaret's understanding she wasn't dealing with this situation alone. Many students' families came from cultures acknowledging supernatural threats and had developed their own protection methods. The parents might not understand specific details, but recognized spiritual danger signs and were prepared to take appropriate action. Timothy Walsh's mother, Sarah, proved particularly helpful in Margaret's efforts. As a seamstress, she possessed keen observational skills and had already noticed behavioral changes in her son, suggesting supernatural influence. Miss Ellis, Timothy has talked in his sleep the past 3 nights, having conversations with someone not there. He keeps saying he wants to go home, but when asked what he means, he cannot explain. Margaret gave Sarah one of the stronger protective charms Mama Lavinia prepared, along with specific instructions for burning protective herbs in Timothy's bedroom. Mrs. Walsh, it's important Timothy understands he should not listen to any woman visiting his dreams, no matter what she promises. The person he talks to in sleep isn't someone wanting to help him. As Margaret continued her rounds, she noticed patterns in how Constance targeted different children. The spirit seemed focusing attention on students experiencing loss or separation, using emotional vulnerabilities as entry points. Children from immigrant families proved particularly susceptible, as natural questions about cultural identity and belonging provided opportunities for Constance, presenting herself as someone providing answers. Margaret's final evening stop was the boarding house, where Robert Fitzgerald lived with his widowed mother. Robert had been one of the tallest students in the graduation photograph's back row, standing directly beside where Constance appeared. His mother, a practical woman working as a housekeeper for a wealthy Savannah family, listened carefully to Margaret's explanation about the protective charm. "Miss Ellis, Robert has had the strangest dreams," Mrs. Fitzgerald said, accepting the small cloth bag. "He dreams of a woman claiming to be his teacher from another school. One where all children who died continue education. She tells him he's invited to join this special school, but must come alone and cannot tell anyone we're going." Margaret felt a chill of recognition hearing Mrs. Fitzgerald's description. Constance adapted her approach to each child's interests and personality, presenting herself to Robert as an educator, offering advanced opportunities rather than exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. The spirit's ability customizing manipulation suggested intelligence and planning, making her more dangerous than Margaret initially realized. "Mrs. Fitzgerald, it's crucial Robert understands he should never agree going anywhere with this woman. No matter how appealing her offers sound, she's not a real teacher, and the school described doesn't exist in any form safe for a living child." Margaret left the boarding house with growing urgency about the situation. Constance Whitmore's appearances in children's dreams were becoming frequent and sophisticated, suggesting the spirit building toward decisive action. The protective charms might slow progress, but Margaret suspected they wouldn't stop her completely. That night, Margaret barely slept, her mind racing with student safety concerns and questions about her protective ability. She kept graduation photographs locked in a wooden box with protective herbs scattered around, hoping limit Constance's ability using images as supernatural doorways. But even with precautions, Margaret felt oppressive presence, as if something watched from shadows. Around 3 a.m., Margaret awakened by children's voices singing in her garden. She crept to her bedroom window, peering through curtains, seeing nothing in the moonlit yard below. But voices continued. Young voices singing a classroom song about arithmetic tables, harmonies floating through night air, with otherworldly quality making Margaret's skin crawl. Margaret realized Constance's escalating activities, no longer content working through dreams and photographs. The spirit beginning manifest directly in the physical world. Children's voices suggesting established contact with some students beyond dream manipulation. Next morning confirmed Margaret's fears. 3 students failed arriving home previous evening, parents spending nights searching Savannah streets for missing children. Rebecca Chen, Timothy Walsh, and Robert Fitzgerald disappeared between dinner time and bedtime, leaving no notes or explanations. Margaret joined search efforts, heart-heavy knowing conventional methods unlikely locating missing children. If Constance taken them, they might not be in any physical location found through ordinary means. The spirit might have drawn them supernatural space, where boundaries between life and death less defined. As search continued morning without success, Margaret decided visiting Bonaventure Cemetery, attempting communication directly with Constance Whitmore's spirit. Mama Lavinia warned such encounter dangerous. But with 3 children missing, time running out, Margaret felt no choice confronting ghostly teacher directly. Bonaventure Cemetery was sprawling expanse, moss-draped oaks, elaborate Victorian monuments. Place Savannah's dead rested among sculptures, inscriptions speaking love, loss, hope, eventual reunion. Margaret found Constance Whitmore's grave quiet section, reserved yellow fever outbreak victims. A simple headstone, bearing name, birth death dates. Margaret approached gravesite mixture determination terror, unsure expecting, but committed doing necessary rescuing students. She placed graduation photograph Constance's headstone speaking aloud, hoping spirit hear words respond plea. Constance, I know hearing me. I know taken Rebecca, Timothy, Robert. Understand believing needing them. Lost students yellow fever. Grief eating 25 years. But children not taking. They have families who love them and futures belonging to them. For several minutes, nothing occurred. Margaret stood in the cemetery's silence, hearing wind through oak trees and wondering if her communication attempt failed. Gradually, air around Constance's grave grew colder. Margaret seeing breath forming small clouds despite the warm June morning. Temperature continued dropping until Margaret shivered in her summer dress. Then she heard a voice seeming from everywhere and nowhere. A woman's voice, cultured, educated, but carrying desperate sadness making Margaret's heart ache. You don't understand, watching them die one by one, standing helpless beside beds. You don't know promising children always keeping safe, failing when needing most. The voice carried decades, grief guilt, emotions intense transcending death itself. Margaret forced calm, despite supernatural cold, overwhelming sadness emanating gravesite. Constance, understand loss. Know loved students deeply. Taking living children won't bring back lost ones. Create new grief families. Voice grew stronger, present. Constance drawing energy Margaret's emotional response. Better me world disease disappointment. Give education never-ending. Protect dangers waiting future. Never grow facing cruelties adults inflict. Margaret realized grief, twisted love children possessive, destructive. Spirit genuinely believed rescuing students' future suffering, wishing someone rescued pupils' yellow fever outbreak. Good intentions didn't make actions less dangerous living children taken. Constance, children need grow-facing world, dangers disappointments, how become meant. Keeping stealing chances live full lives, make choices, experience joy sorrow. Cold graveside intensified, Margaret feeling presence growing agitated. Joy? Voice carried bitter laugh. What joy watching everyone loved die? What choice matters death comes anyway? Margaret understood, confronting supernatural threat, deeply traumatized soul pain, overwhelming clouded judgment right-wrong. Constance evil traditional sense grieving teacher, love students distorted loss isolation. Constance, students died yellow fever outbreak. Wouldn't want taking children families. Loved too. Want find peace. Spending eternity replacing stolen souls. Moment cold grave lessened. Margaret thought reaching rational spirit part. Temperature plummeted. Voice returned renewed intensity. Know nothing students want. Taken before finishing teaching needed know. Failed once. Won't fail new children. Stay safe. No disease touch. No one hurt again. Margaret realized rational argument alone, insufficient convincing Constance. Release missing children. Spirit grief. Guilt created psychological prison preventing seeing harm causing. Margaret needed different approach, addressing emotional needs, securing freedom. Constance, another way helping children without taking families. Find peace using teaching skills. Protecting tragedy took students. Voice silent minutes. Margaret feeling Constance considering suggestion. Spirit spoke tone less agitated, deeply skeptical. Mean? How help children beyond grave bringing safety? Margaret breathed deeply. Next words determining missing children lived, died. Become guardian spirit kidnapper. Watch children danger warning teachers, parents threats approach. Use knowledge, tragedy preventing happening others. Cold grave fluctuated. Constance struggling conflicting emotions impulses. Margaret sensed desperate desire helping children warring needing possess control. Let go. Stop trying keeping safe. Guarantee won't suffer fate students. Promise. Live full happy lives never knowing loss destroyed. Margaret felt impossible question weight. Couldn't promise Rebecca, Timothy, Robert never experience loss suffering. Human condition escaping. Offer, speaking Constance's identity educator. Can't promise never suffering Constance. Promise chance, learning whatever experiences life brings. Teaching really about? Giving children tools, handling encountering, shielding possible harm. Argument resonated deep spirit. Touching remembered dedicated educator, grief-stricken kidnapper. Cold grave dissipating. Margaret feeling supernatural presence less oppressive. So young, Constance's voice whispered, carrying sadness anger. Students barely begun learning world fever took, desperately giving time, knowledge, preparation life. Margaret moved closer headstone, speaking directly grave, Constance physically present. Gave everything time together. Love, knowledge shared mattered. Lives shorter, wanted. Stealing children's futures honor, memory heal grief. Presence grave wavering, Constance fighting internal battle, protective instincts, rational understanding. Right wrong. Margaret sensed crucial moment spirit releasing children, committing fully keeping supernatural realm created. Constance, asking, teacher, teacher, letting Rebecca, Timothy, Robert return families. Help continuing work started, helping children learn, grow become meant. Let grief turning causing families pain endured. Cold cemetery air warming, Margaret feeling Constance's presence fading. Spirit spoke, voice, faint straining here. Children. Old schoolhouse taught. Building torn 10 years ago, stands place between places. Safe there, truly alive either. Need guiding back world living, forgetting ever belonged. Margaret felt relief. Children alive concern, Constance meant place between places. Find schoolhouse? Bring back? Constance's voice barely audible, speaking great distance. Follow path leading backward. Schoolhouse stood. Look, building existing memory love. Hurry, teacher. Longer staying place. Harder remembering wanting leave. Supernatural presence grave faded completely, leaving Margaret alone, moss-draped monuments. Remained minutes processing occurred understanding instructions Constance given. Old schoolhouse referred original Whitmore Elementary building, demolished 1900 current structure built different site. Margaret left Bonaventure Cemetery urgency driving forward. Needed finding location, original Whitmore Elementary, stood accessing supernatural version building, existing place between places. Task seemed impossible. 3 children's lives depending success, determined bringing home safely. Margaret's first stop, Savannah Historical Society, hoping finding records showing exact location original Whitmore Elementary building. Society's archives contained detailed maps, city development past century, documentation buildings demolished newer construction. Historical Society's librarian, Mr. Cornelius Ashworth, intrigued Margaret's request information original school building. Miss Ellis, asking interested particular structure? Building torn quite time ago, nothing remarkable left site. Margaret chose words carefully, revealing supernatural aspects. Search conveying urgency situation. Mr. Ashworth, researching history education Savannah Special Project, believe original Whitmore Elementary significant work. Show exactly located? Mr. Ashworth led Margaret large map. Savannah showing city's layout 1885, year yellow fever outbreak claimed Constance's students. Original Whitmore Elementary stood plot land, occupied small park, surrounded newer residential buildings, constructed 1890s. School 2-story brick building bell tower, Mr. Ashworth explained, pointing architectural drawings, showing structure's layout. Housed 60 students considered modern time. Decision demolish purely practical. City needed larger school building. Site suitable expansion. Margaret studied architectural drawings carefully, memorizing school's layout, understanding supernatural version, building manifest same location. According to Constance's instructions, she needed looking building existing only memory love, suggesting emotional connection, children understanding educational purpose, key accessing supernatural realm. Margaret thanked Mr. Ashworth, assistance making way small park, occupying original Whitmore Elementary site. Area quiet, late afternoon. Elderly residents sitting benches watching children playing modern playground equipment. Margaret found difficult imagining peaceful space site, tragedy, supernatural activity. Standing front entrance would been, Margaret closed eyes visualizing building architectural drawings. Thought Constance Whitmore, standing classroom teaching arithmetic penmanship, children trusting guiding education. Imagined hallways filled young voices, chalk scratching blackboards, students working lessons. Several minutes, nothing happened. Margaret began worrying, misunderstood Constance's instructions. Supernatural schoolhouse beyond ability access. Gradually became aware subtle changes. Surroundings suggesting extraordinary beginning occur. Modern playground equipment, fading edges, becoming less solid present, air taking different quality, reminding old buildings, decades accumulated memories. Smelled chalk dust. Lamp oil. Sense logical source contemporary park setting. Speaking mind, 19th century classrooms, educational dedication. Margaret opened eyes, finding standing 2-story brick building, matching architectural drawings, studied historical society. Structure appeared solid real, existing strange twilight realm, normal rules, time-space suspended. Modern Savannah, visible edges. Vision, supernatural schoolhouse commanding primary attention. Margaret approached building's front entrance, noting details confirming successfully accessed realm Constance taken missing children. Brass name plate. Door read, Whitmore Elementary School established 1878. Through windows, seeing warm glow oil lamps illuminating empty classrooms, waiting students never returning. Front door opened, touch Margaret stepping hallway, feeling familiar, deeply unsettling. Walls lined children's artwork, educational posters, everything slightly faded, quality memories preserved beyond natural lifespan. Heard voices coming upstairs, classrooms, young voices reciting lessons, careful cadence. 19th century education. Margaret climbed stairs slowly, footsteps echoing supernatural quiet building. Voices grew clearer approaching Constance's classroom, distinguishing Rebecca's voice, mechanically reciting multiplication tables, Timothy Robert. Something wrong, speech patterns, hollow quality suggesting participating educational exercises, real understanding engagement. Margaret reached classroom door, peering inside. Heartbreaking saw. Rebecca. Timothy. Robert sitting old-fashioned wooden desks, modern clothing looking place 19th century setting. Faces truly alarming Margaret. Children's expressions, vacant, dreamy, partially present bodies. Standing front classroom Constance Whitmore, appearing graduation photograph, solid present supernatural realm. Ghostly teacher conducting arithmetic lesson, mechanical precision, repeating educational routines, decades. Students' responses equally mechanical, lacking natural curiosity. Engagement characterizing living children. Margaret entered classroom quietly, startling children, provoking confrontation. Constance endangering escape chances. Ghostly teacher noticed presence immediately, pausing lesson regarding Margaret mixture recognition, defensive hostility. Miss Ellis shouldn't come here. Classroom, students now. Learning properly, safely. Distractions. Dangers plague education world. Constance's voice carried authority, maintaining classroom discipline decades, underneath desperate needing justifying actions. Margaret looked 3 children, noting vacant expressions, fudging edges, connection world, living growing progressively weaker. Constance really learning, going motions, understanding growth, education, imprisonment, disguised instruction. Rebecca, Timothy. Robert continued mechanical recitation, multiplication tables, apparently unaware conversation around. Margaret realized children trapped supernatural trance, preventing recognizing situation, making autonomous decisions state. Children, hear me? Rebecca, Timothy, Robert, Miss Ellis, Teacher Whitmore Elementary. Families looking want come home. Margaret spoke directly former students, hoping breaking spell Constance cast. Moment Rebecca's recitation faltered, looking Margaret flicker recognition eyes. Miss Ellis, supposed helping mother laundry afternoon. Still school? Voice carried genuine confusion, awakening deep sleep, trying remembering supposed. Constance moved quickly reassert control situation, placing hand Rebecca's shoulder, speaking soothing tones, carrying supernatural compulsion. Worry mundane concerns, dear. Real education happening, learning everything, needing knowing interruption limitation. Margaret realized engaged battle, children's souls. Contest, Constance's supernatural influence, children's natural desire, returning families, normal lives. Ghostly teacher's power, realm considerable. Based children's gradual acceptance situation direct force. Rebecca, thinking parents. Love needing coming home. Thinking real life. Artificial classroom learning. Helping growing becoming meant. Margaret spoke authority affection developed years educator, trying re-establishing connection former students. Timothy looked arithmetic, eyes showing awareness classmates. Miss Ellis, lady said families really needing anymore. Better learning nothing bad happening. Missing mother, wanting going home supper. Constance's expression grew desperate, sensing control, children beginning weakening. Timothy, understanding dangers waiting outside world. Worrying disappointment loss, cruel realities destroying children's innocence. Margaret stepped closer Timothy's desk, maintaining eye contact, boy addressing Constance's concerns. Constance protecting children, disappointment, loss education, stagnation. Children needing experiencing challenges, setbacks, growth. Job teacher shielding life, preparing. Robert, deeply entranced 3 children, suddenly looked tears eyes. Once seeing mother. Must worrying promised, helping evening chores. Remember getting classroom? Supernatural classroom beginning flicker fade edges, children's awareness, true situation increasing. Margaret realized Constance's power directly connected acceptance, ghostly teacher's version. Reality, remembering real lives relationships, supernatural realm becoming less stable, compelling. Constance made final attempt maintaining control stolen students, moving center classroom speaking authority, mustering. Children, trusting. Teaching decades, knowing best education safety. Miss Ellis understanding special opportunities available. Children longer listening, Constance's promises, reassurances. Remembered families, real lives. Desire returning world belonging. Rebecca stood desk, followed Timothy Robert, moving toward Margaret representing doorway, back temporarily forgotten. Margaret gathered 3 children around, feeling warmth, solidity returning, reconnecting living identities. Time going home, families waiting, worrying since disappearing. Supernatural classroom continued fading, flickering, walls becoming transparent, Constance's power realm weakening. Ghostly teacher stood alone, front empty classroom, expression shifting, anger, sadness, growing recognition attempt, rebuilding, lost family. Failed. Taking back world hurting, Constance said, voice carrying decades accumulated grief fear. Kept safe forever, given education never ending, protected cruelties awaiting life. Margaret felt genuine sympathy, ghostly teacher's pain. Understood Constance's solution fundamentally wrong. Safety highest goal education, Constance. Growth, children needing experiencing life fully joys. Sorrows becoming meant. As Margaret led Rebecca, Timothy, and Robert toward the classroom door, the supernatural schoolhouse began dissolving around them. The 19th century desks and educational materials faded, like morning mist, replaced by familiar sights and sounds of contemporary Savannah. They found themselves standing in the small park where original Whitmore Elementary once stood, modern playground equipment solid and present around them. The 3 children looked around confused, trying understanding, going classroom, standing outdoor park. No memory transition. Margaret realized their experience, Constance's supernatural realm seeming strange dream, confused memory, fading, time, traumatizing impossible recollections. Miss Ellis, get park? Rebecca asked, voice carrying natural confusion awakening vivid dream. Remember classroom, different teacher there. Margaret knelt, children's eye level, choosing words carefully, providing comfort, adding confusion. Having shared dream experience, sometimes happening. Children. Stressful situations. Important. Safe now, families looking. Need getting home quickly possible. Margaret walked 3 children Savannah's evening streets, delivering safely worried families. Reunion scenes, emotional heartwarming, parents fearing worst, embracing children, seeming confused, unharmed supernatural experience. Margaret provided simple explanations, children wandering, becoming disoriented, avoiding mention ghostly teachers, supernatural classrooms. Chen family received Rebecca overwhelming relief. Mrs. Chen examining daughter carefully, signs, harm, distress. Satisfied Rebecca physically uninjured, Mrs. Chen thanked Margaret deep boos, insisting staying tea. Rebecca telling version happened. Remember very sleepy classroom, Timothy Robert. Real classroom, Rebecca explained, sipping tea. Lady teacher seeming very sad, wanting learning arithmetic never ending. Kept thinking Papa, wanting coming home supper. Margaret left Chen family's laundry assurance, Rebecca suffering lasting effects, supernatural experience. Child seeming processing events, unusual, ultimately harmless adventure. Response, allowing integrating experience trauma. Timothy Walsh's reunion, mother equally emotional. Sarah Walsh, holding son close, trying explaining confused memories afternoon. Margaret provided Sarah Mama Lavania's stronger protective charms, explaining Timothy benefiting additional spiritual protection, processing unusual experience. Miss Ellis, Timothy keeps talking, teacher wanting keeping, safe growing, Sarah said, preparing late supper son. Says seeming very lonely, wanting staying forever, knowing belonging real family. Margaret nodded, understanding Timothy's natural attachment, mother strong enough helping resisting Constance's supernatural influence. Mrs. Walsh, children instinctive knowledge belonging, Timothy's love wanting coming home, powerful protections, anyone trying leading astray. Robert Fitzgerald's return, Mother perhaps poignant 3 reunions. Mrs. Fitzgerald spent entire day searching Savannah streets, fearing son falling river injured accident, leaving completely alone world. Margaret appearing boarding house Robert Toe, Mrs. Fitzgerald broke tears, relief gratitude. Miss Ellis, knowing thanking bringing home safely, Mrs. Fitzgerald said, holding Robert close. Left world, thought losing bearing. Happened. Where day. Margaret provided Mrs. Fitzgerald gentle explanation given families, emphasizing Robert becoming confused, disoriented, safe, unharmed. Gave Mrs. Fitzgerald Mama Lavinia's protective charms, explaining helping Robert sleeping peacefully, avoiding recurring nightmares-related experience. Robert himself seeming affected time Constance's supernatural classroom. Usually cheerful demeanor replaced thoughtful seriousness, suggesting processing complex emotions. Mother, dreamed teacher saying teaching everything world, trying learning, nothing taught feeling real important. Kept thinking, wanting coming home helping evening chores. Margaret making way home. Savannah's quiet evening streets reflected day's extraordinary events resolution. 3 children rescued supernatural captivity. Grieving spirit confronted truth actions. Community protected threat. People fully understanding. Margaret understood experience changed fundamental ways, affecting approach, teaching, understanding responsibilities, caring young minds. Next morning brought sense, normalcy, feeling almost surreal, supernatural drama previous day. Margaret returned empty classroom Whitmore Elementary, preparing summer break, administrative tasks, occupying time next school year beginning. Graduation photographs remained locked wooden box, surrounded protective herbs serving reminder quickly. Ordinary educational situations becoming extraordinary challenges. Margaret spent morning writing detailed reports, former students' progress, potential documents, helping future teachers understanding individual strengths, needs. Working. Found thinking. Constance Whitmore, wondering ghostly teacher, finally finding peace eluded 25 years. Around midday, Margaret surprised visit Mama Lavinia, arriving school carrying small bundle-wrapped black cloth. Elderly woman's expression serious alarmed, suggesting bringing news warnings, new supernatural threats. Miss Ellis felt Constance's spirit departing early morning, Mama Lavinia said, settling child-sized chairs Margaret's classroom. Moved whatever realm awaits teachers' completed earthly responsibilities. Crisis over, things understanding happening why. Mama Lavinia unwrapped bundle, revealing original graduation photograph Margaret's session. Version showing trace, Constance's mysterious presence. Image depicted physically present. Photography session, 22 children beloved teacher, captured moment educational celebration. Photograph always appearing, Mama Lavinia explained. Constance's spiritual energy distorting images, using Windows World Living. Found peace, photographs showing actually taken. Margaret examined corrected photograph carefully, noting natural normal appearing compared disturbing images dealing weeks. Mama Lavinia, convinced Constance releasing children moving on. Spoke cemetery. Sure arguments effective. Elderly woman smiled, expression carrying wisdom, dealing supernatural situations decades. Miss Ellis Constance, convinced logical arguments right wrong. Convinced seeing genuine love dedication action. Risked entering supernatural realm, rescuing children. Proved understanding, deep commitment, education-motivated actions. Mama Lavinia explained, Constance's spiritual transformation occurred, witnessing Margaret's willingness, confronting supernatural dangers, students' welfare. Ghostly teacher recognized Margaret passionate dedication, children's welfare defining career. recognition helping understanding difference, protective love, possessive control. Constance saw yourself, saw become grief-distorted judgment, courage, commitment, reminded becoming teacher first place, helping children growing learning, keeping trapped artificial safety. Margaret felt deep sense closure understanding spiritual dynamics, resolving crisis. Confrontation. Constance rescuing 3 specific children. It involved helping tormented spirit, remembering true purpose, finding peace, fulfilling deepest calling. Following days, Margaret distributed corrected graduation photographs, students' families, explaining processing error, original prints resolved. Families accepted new photographs gratefully, noting clearer, natural-appearing earlier versions. Mrs. Chen examined corrected photograph carefully, comparing memories graduation ceremony. Miss Ellis, picture feels right way didn't. Captures joy, accomplishment felt day strange shadows darkening earlier version. Kowalski family expressed similar satisfaction, corrected photograph James's father, noting son relaxed, cheerful receiving new image. Miss Ellis James, sleeping peacefully ever since bringing new photograph. Whatever troubling seems, resolved. Margaret's final visit Walsh boarding house delivering corrected photograph Timothy mother. Sarah Walsh studied image seamstress's eye detail, nodding approval saw. Miss Ellis, photograph tells true story graduation day, Sarah said showing image Timothy. Shows children proud achievements, ready facing whatever comes next education. Memory worth preserving. Timothy examined photograph serious attention, giving educational materials. Young face showing relief, confirming disturbing presence, longer visible classmates. Miss Ellis, picture feels happy way didn't. Look, feeling sad. Worried anything. Margaret completed distribution, corrected photographs, reflected lessons, entire experience taught nature, education responsibilities, caring young minds. Supernatural crisis, forced confronting questions. Protection versus growth. Safety versus challenge. Fine line nurturing love. Possessive control. Margaret returned classroom final time summer break. Packing supplies materials awaiting return fall. Working. Found thinking new school year fresh group students occupying desks, filling walls, energy learning discovery. Experience Constance Whitmore deepened. Margaret's understanding meant educator ways, teacher training provided. Learned true educational love meant preparing children, independence, fostering dependence, encouraging growth, preventing change, accepting ultimate goal teaching, helping students moving beyond needing particular teacher. Margaret locked classroom door summer, carrying sense completion beyond normal satisfaction, finishing successful school year. Faced extraordinary challenge emerged, deeper appreciation, privileges, responsibilities, chosen profession. Walking Savannah's sun-dappled streets toward small house, Margaret reflected mysterious nature experience concluded. Most people believing supernatural aspects occurred, perhaps best. Important thing, 3 children safely returned families. Tormented spirit found peace. Community protected threat. Transcended ordinary understanding. Evening Margaret sat garden cup tea, watching sunset painting sky shades rose gold. Graduation photographs stored safely house, longer carrying supernatural threat. Serving reminders, extraordinary events unfolded simple school milestone. Margaret found thinking Constance Whitmore, wondering kind teacher before grief loss, distorted perspective. Based dedication shown ghostly state. Constance probably much. Margaret herself, woman devoted life. Nurturing young minds, helping children reaching full potential. Tragedy, Constance's story, losing students. Yellow fever, grief preventing understanding deaths, diminishing value, education love provided brief lives. Every teacher facing reality students, eventually moving beyond influence. Measure educational success. Teachers maintaining control. Students. Well preparing students' independent lives. Margaret made silent promise, remembering Constance's story, whenever feeling tempted, possessive students' affections, protective life's natural challenges. Ghostly teacher's fate served powerful reminder. Educational love directed students' growth independence, teachers needing connection control. Stars appearing Savannah's evening sky, Margaret felt sense peace settling thoughts. Supernatural crisis truly over. Lessons continuing and forming teaching years come. Learned things, courage, dedication, true nature, educational responsibility, making better, teacher, complete person. Margaret spent rest summer preparing new school year, renewed enthusiasm, deeper wisdom. Read educational journals, attended professional development sessions, took time reflecting spiritual dimensions, teaching rarely discussed academic settings. Experienced Constance taught education, transmitting knowledge skills, nurturing souls, preparing young people for complexity, human existence. September arrived. Margaret welcomed new group students' classroom. Profound appreciation, trust, parents placed care. Each child represented unique combination potential vulnerability. Margaret's job, helping developing strengths, building resilience, needing facing life's inevitable challenges. Margaret never experiencing dramatically supernatural encounter Constance Whitmore, remained aware mysterious dimensions surrounding educational relationships. Bonds teachers, students operating levels, transcending ordinary professional interactions, creating connections, persisting long formal education ended. Years later, Margaret becoming Savannah's respected educators, occasionally telling trusted colleagues, importance, understanding deeper responsibilities, teaching. Spoke balancing protection challenge, nurturing independence, love professional boundaries. Never mentioning supernatural crisis taught lessons. Understanding educational wisdom. Best transmitted. Example, explanation. Margaret's graduation photographs. Memorable class. 1910. Hung parlor rest life. Serving reminders. Joys, responsibilities. Chosen profession. Visitors commenting. Happy, confident children-looking image. Margaret smiling. Knowing photograph capturing should moment educational celebration. Unmarred supernatural shadows. Experience Constance Whitmore taught Margaret teaching ultimately love. Love properly understood, appropriately expressed. Caring enough students preparing independence. Loving enough allowing facing challenges making mistakes. Trusting enough believing handling whatever life brought way. Margaret's career continued 20 years. Teaching hundreds children, helping shaping next generation Savannah's citizens. Never forgetting lessons learned supernatural summer. Students benefiting wisdom, gained encountering grieving spirit, loving, possessively protecting completely. Margaret finally retired teaching, leaving legacy students prepared academically, emotionally, spiritually complexities adult life. Approach education. Informed understanding possibilities, dangers, created generations, young people, confident abilities, humble approach learning. Margaret passed away peacefully, 1935, surrounded former students becoming teachers themselves, carrying forward educational philosophy, new generation's children. Funeral attended hundreds people lives, touched dedication wisdom, grave Bonaventure Cemetery, becoming place teachers, coming reflecting, calling responsibilities. Graduation photograph 1910, donated Savannah Historical Society, becoming exhibit Evolution Public Education City. Visitors exhibit commenting joy, confidence. Visible children's faces. Museum guides explaining photograph, representing best traditions, American education, capturing moment students. Teacher coming together, celebration, learning growth. Photograph's important legacy, historical artifact, reminder lessons learned. Extraordinary summer boundaries, natural supernatural worlds briefly dissolved. Lessons continuing, informing educational practice. Ways, subtle, profound, helping teachers understanding work, involving minds, bodies, souls. Story, Constance Whitmore. Margaret Ellis becoming Savannah's unofficial folklore, past educators, cautionary tale. Importance, healthy boundaries, educational relationships. Supernatural elements dismissed embellishment, core message remaining powerful teaching, requiring special love, prioritizing students' growth, teachers' needs. Margaret's house eventually becoming boarding house young teachers. New Savannah, reporting experiencing dreams kindly older woman, offering advice, handling difficult educational challenges. Dreams representing Margaret's continued presence power example, serving perpetuating wisdom, gained encountering supernatural. Original Whitmore Elementary building, constructed replacing structure Constance taught, continuing serving Savannah's children decades. Teachers working reporting special sense responsibility dedication, building carrying memories, educational devotion, inspiring everyone working walls. End, story teachers class, 1910 becoming account supernatural intervention rescue. Becoming testament transformative power education, practiced wisdom, courage, genuine love. Students' welfare. Photograph containing mysterious threatening presence, transformed symbol education's highest ideals. Capturing moment. Learning growth, celebrated reservation shadow. Lessons learned extraordinary. Summer continuing resonating, generations, teachers, students, reminding education. Preparing young people lives, meaning, purpose, contribution. Supernatural crisis past, wisdom gained confronting remaining, helping educators understanding work. Professional calling sacred trust, demanding best hearts, minds, souls.